You may not necessarily be attracted to the other person on a deep physical level, on that sort of chemistry level. Maybe you're not immediately struck that they have similar attitudes or similar beliefs as you do. But let's say that in talking to the person, let's say you meet somebody and it's pretty clear to you that that person is going through something, maybe something traumatic. Maybe they just lost somebody, or maybe they just had a breakup in a romantic relationship. And so you exhibit characteristics such as being sensitive or sensitivity. Researchers would say that that's a basis for attraction. And after talking to that person, after a length of time, that person is attracted to you, maybe because you took the time to listen to that person. And you perhaps are more attracted to that person because you are listening, because you do have the interaction. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So that's what she means by sensitivity. By confidence, we may not necessarily be attracted to somebody initially, again, by their physical appearance. We may not necessarily think that they have similar attitudes, but there is something to be said about starting to talk to someone and they have real confidence, self-confidence, not arrogance. That's different. And sometimes there's a fine line. People say, I really don't believe that. I think arrogance is very different than just having a good sense of self. So what she means by confidence is that you feel good about yourself, not arrogant, but you feel good about yourself. And research shows that when you do feel good about yourself, people are more attracted to you. Not necessarily just romantically, but people just have a tendency to listen to you. I mean, think about your professors. The professors who seem maybe more confident in their subject matter. Maybe they've been teaching for a long time. And also they're more dynamic. They try to make their lectures more interesting, maybe less monotone. Students definitely have a better success rate of listening to those professors versus the ones maybe who are very new, not used to talking in front of people. Maybe they lack confidence, maybe they lack that charisma. It makes sense. We're probably not going to have our attention on them as much, probably not going to get as much out of their lectures as, again, the professor or teacher who's more dynamic, more comfortable. So Wallace said we are more attracted, even romantically, to people who are more self-confident. Okay? Let's skip C for a second and go to D, flirtatiousness or immediacy. Immediacy is a communication term. This is a communication term. So she borrowed this from communication scholars. Immediacy means that you immediately, using that term immediately, sense certain nonverbal characteristics that draw you to somebody. Not necessarily romantically, but make you want to listen to that person because they have good hand gestures, because their body posturing is open. They're not closed off with their arms crossed or back or their shoulders looking rigid, but they're very open. They have really good eye contact. They're focused right on you when you're talking. Okay, those are things that sort of make up this idea of immediacy. We have a tendency to be more attracted romantically and even friendship-wise to people who, I know she calls it flirtatiousness because in that sense she is talking about being romantic, being outwardly, flirting with somebody. But the reason I have a slash there is because the other part of that is you can be attracted to a person, not romantically, but again, listen to someone like a professor, more so if they seem more attentive to you. Again, they have more eye contact focused on you. They're more charismatic. To quote sort of a cliche, the camera loves them, so to speak. And it's true if you think about political candidates. We do have a tendency to be more open to listening to somebody politically, even maybe if we're not in the same party affiliation, if they have more charisma, um, and just seem more dynamic as a speaker. Okay, so that's what she's talking about there by immediacy. The one, and I don't have it written here, I apologize, I don't have it written here as a negative, but she found a negative characteristic of communication behaviors. In other words, a turn off, a true correlation turn off when you meet somebody, when you first meet somebody. And that is letter C there under number 4, talkativeness. She called it talkativeness. I probably would have named it self-absorption or arrogance. If we get to know, I'm sorry, not get to know somebody, I'm sorry about that. If we start initially having a conversation with somebody, we first meet somebody, and we do believe they're arrogant, not self-confident, but truly arrogant, full of themselves, as I put down, self-absorbed, we tend to have a negative perception. And this is correlated, which means statistically we have a very high statistical chance of being negatively influenced by them. In other words, we're negatively attracted to them. We have a greater chance of disliking that person initially if we believe them to be arrogant. Sidebar, just as a sidebar, we learned before at the very beginning of the semester about the halo effect. I think we just talked about it briefly. If we didn't go into it in detail, just sort of as a refresher, we tend to make first impressions, right, of people, and that first impression seems to stick for a long time. And sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes we meet somebody and we think they're, say, A or B. We think they're something, and then we get to know them and we find out they're not like that at all. And that can be positive or negative. And I think I used the romantic example of someone who, if a female, thinks she meets her Prince Charming, and, you know, he seems nice, he seems like he's good to her, but a couple of months into the relationship, she decides he's a frog. Okay, maybe his true colors show, and he's really not that considerate, or he's really not that polite, etc., etc. Okay, so our initial impression was affected by that, and maybe our friends, you know, after a couple of weeks pointed out, hey, this person, you know, really isn't that good for you. That person really isn't all he claims to be. But we're still hung up on that first initial impression, and we don't see it. We say love is blind. That's a cliche that comes from Shakespeare. It comes from Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. Love is blind. Meaning that sometimes we're just blinded and we don't see all their faults until, you know, months or even longer down the road, even though our friends and family have been telling us. Okay, so back to this point. Initially, we are not attracted to somebody who is very arrogant. But sometimes we think somebody is self-confident and they turn around and actually we learn that they're self-absorbed. I know this is kind of confusing because I'm throwing in a negative there, but I just wanted to sort of try to show you the difference between initial perceptions, initial wrong perceptions, and, you know, after getting to know somebody. If you want me to go over this again on Thursday, I'll be happy to. My throat's getting dry. I'm going to take a break and pause this and actually review some of this. So I'm going to actually I'm going to stop this and I'll start the next segment. So I guess this will be sort of like segment 1 of this, you know, whole idea of intimacy and relational communication.